Welcome to SeerCast, where founders and CEOs from the banking, payments, and fintech industry share their knowledge and expertise on solving real world problems. You'll receive tips and techniques on various topics that you can use right away, such as growing a startup, finding funding, bank fintech relationships, change in regulations, and so much more. I'm Adwait Joshi, and I'm founder and chief seer at Data Seers. So let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our episode of SeerCast. I have with me here Caleb Avery, the CEO and founder of Tilt. So, Caleb, tell us a little bit about yourself and Tilt.
Sure. So, my background, I started out in the payment space, going door to door, selling payments to small business owners when I was 19. And so for me, over time, we scaled up that first business, and then we kept consistently getting brought in on these consulting engagements for software companies. And most of those software businesses were vertical software companies, anywhere from like 100 million to over $1 billion of GMV. And the consistent issue for a lot of these guys was trying to figure out, like, how do we monetize payments? That was that consistent thread that was coming up, where a lot of these guys were just passing along the 2.9% and 30 cents from Stripe or Braintree onto their customers. And so after a couple of years of seeing that same problem over and over again, I felt like I needed to take that entrepreneurial leap and start another business. And ultimately that became, Tilled and what we call PayFac-as-a-Service.
Oh, nice. And so you always were into business, looks like, right? At 19. And so starting Tilt, tell us a little bit about, some of your initial hurdles, some of the problems you faced, because it's a big, bold move, working for yourself versus now having more employees and taking on more responsibility. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, when I was doing this consulting work, there was probably almost a year between having the initial idea for Tilt and then actually deciding to go build a business. And I think for me, the original feedback that I was continuing to get from customers during the consulting work was that time to market was one of the big constraints and the big reasons why they weren't willing to consider leaving a Stripe or a Braintree. You look at the ease of the integration on something like Stripe and you compare that to a direct processor integration. It's kind of night and day in terms of the developer experience. And so for me, one of the original questions was like, what would have to be true for us to get a software company live in 1 week? That was the original hypothesis, because I said, hey, if I can convince myself that there's a path to getting there to this like mythical kind of 1 week integration, well, then there's a business worth building. If I'm still going to be 6 months or 9 months like competitors, what are we really doing that's truly differentiated in the space? And so as I started to investigate that problem, it was pretty clear that there were some regulatory hurdles and some technology hurdles. And so for me, I started out a little over 4 years ago as a solo founder, and really at that point in time, it was trying to spend it was about 10 months before I brought on a hired co-founder essentially to convince myself that we could overcome the regulatory and the technical hurdles to get at least close to that 1 week hurdle.
Nice. So it took you 10 months to get to that 1 week of doing the business, opening a business. That's interesting metric, right?
Yeah, it's really hard to do things that are simple. But once I had kind of the initial relationships with our banking and processing partners in place, that overcame the regulatory component. And then as I started to find folks to work with on the technology side, and I think one of the foundational decisions was making the decision to build our own gateway in-house. And so as we started doing that development work, I mean, it took 2.5 years for us to even be live in market with the first version of the product. And so there were definitely some substantial obstacles to overcome, regulatory, technical, and then obviously fundraising being a pretty big barrier as well.
Yep. And so that tells you, right, sometimes the industry is just not ready for what you want. It almost feels like you're too early or you're earlier than where the industry is at. And that brings me to, you have this nice tagline behind you, PayFac-as-a-Service. I'm pretty sure everybody has heard of PayFac, but you almost are creating a category out of this PayFac-as-a-Service. So tell us a little bit more about that. How did you come up with the idea Obviously, you're solving a problem that's very relevant in the industry. So let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, I think exactly as you say, there are so many people that are familiar with the term PayFac. I don't think actually most people understand exactly what it means, but they've at least heard, the term and are curious. And for me, prior to starting Tild, we did a lot of customer discovery work in the early days to really get feedback from customers. And there were so many people that were interested in the concept of the PayFac model, instant merchant onboarding, the ability to monetize payments. Like there's a lot of things that are really exciting about the model. But when you started to dig into our competitors and the product that they'd actually brought to market, it was incredibly complicated, incredibly nuanced. There were regulatory challenges, compliance challenges. You needed to have, a certain amount of cash on the balance sheet. It just was a very complex business. And the idea behind, PayFac-as-a-Service, which, we coined the term. The category did not exist until
Absolutely.
Tild, came into existence, was really about trying to create, this vision that I had for a simplified, PayFac solution. Again, back to that idea of getting live in 1 week. Well, that means that we have to do all of these things for you as a service. And as we started to go out and test, that messaging with customers, it really immediately resonated with people. Were like, oh yeah, I'm really excited about PayFac. And oh, well, what is PayFac as a service? I've never heard of that concept. Let me, investigate that. And I think it just captivated the essence of what it was that we were trying to communicate at Tild, and I think has really been incredibly beneficial to us from a branding and a marketing and a messaging perspective, where I think for a lot of founders, when they think about, marketing, they think about, oh, we're going to go spend money on, Google AdWords, but you really have to focus first on that foundation of messaging, positioning. How do you compete against your competitors? And that the concept of PayFac as a service, I think, clearly delineated our offering against a Stripe, against, an Infinisep. And it's like, hey, here's our flag. This is where we fit into the ecosystem. And once that was clear to folks, the ISVs and software companies that were excited, about the model knew exactly what, the value prop was. And that, I think, ultimately has been a major reason why we've been able to drive as much inbound demand as we have.
Cool. So, me as an end customer, right? So I have a business, and let's say I'm a small business. I think you guys are more enabling those small to medium businesses to accept payments and, do their day-to-day job. Like a lot of times, some of these small businesses don't have a way to accept money. So they're reliant on either they get a check or they're using Venmo, then they have to somehow, or Cash App or whatever, they have to somehow integrate that into their QuickBooks, and they don't know how the money is coming in, and they're commingling all their funds with their personal accounts, and it just becomes a mess, right? So when you focus on a small business, how do the small business see this, right? I mean, I would think that they don't understand PayFac. I don't think that they understand PayFac as a service. At that point, they're saying, okay, I did a job. I want to get paid. So how do you approach them to say, hey, look, I have something new for you that's easier for you guys to use and better than what's out there in some way, shape, or form, right? So how do you target them? You said Google AdWords, other forms of advertisement, but what does that segment or that market look like for you, and how do you capture it?
Yeah, so I think for Tild, our universe actually starts a level up from the SMB itself. So typically the partner for Tild is actually a vertical software platform. So it could be a dental practice management software, a golf course practice or golf course management platform, could be a nonprofit donation management solution. So we are providing turnkey white label payments infrastructure for the software company. And ultimately that enables them to offer that merchant service experience to all of those SMB clients underneath them. And so for us, in a lot of cases, we're actually not interacting necessarily directly with the end merchant. We're providing our software partners with a white label experience for them to go onboard the dental office or the golf course or the gym. And then we're facilitating the collection of all of those payments and then paying our software partner a large residual on all of the payments flowing through the platform. But from a product perspective, we do spend a lot of time thinking about how to solve problems for those in merchants where they want more payment methods available. So it's not just credit and debit cards, it's ACH, it's Apple Pay, it's a mobile reader. And so offering them all of the different methods ultimately enables them to be more successful collecting payments, from their downstream customers. And so we certainly spend a lot of time from a product perspective thinking about, that kind of voice of the customer from a merchant perspective, although we're kind of a layer removed necessarily in the sales process to bring them onto the Till platform. They're still a key consumer of our systems.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So all of this, right, going after this market, developing a unique software, solving a lot of these problems, it all takes a lot of money, right? And you obviously have raised some money. So let's talk about that because, a lot of times, especially in the market that we are today, which is very different from the market that was 2 years ago, how was the experience like? How much time did you have to spend? What was the process like? Because, sometimes people have a challenge, right? If you are a serial entrepreneur, well known in the industry, easy. You can knock on a door, it opens up, here's a check.
Couple text messages.
Exactly. Easy, right? But sometimes it's hard. First time, second time, it's really hard because, people, don't know, you're not, all these big founders, you don't have a big name behind you. So what was an experience like? And what did you feel? What worked for you? What didn't work for you? Because I'm sure a lot of our listeners are in that process. Some may have raised money and going for the next rounds. Some are scared of starting a business, honestly, in today's environment because they're like, well, I don't want to do it now because I may not be able to raise money. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So, we at this point have raised, I don't know, four different rounds of funding. And each one of those was a very different experience for different reasons. When I think back to the first outside money that we raised, this was, I think we closed in like October of 2020. So kind of heyday of the pandemic. And so, I started my process in July of 2020. And for me, at that point in time, I didn't have this massive network of VC, relationships. I was not, an icon in Silicon Valley. I didn't have, all of these assets available. And so for me, my fundraising process for that first, pre-seed round started with cold emails to investors. And I think for a lot of founders, there's plenty of articles out there saying like you have to get, warm introductions to talk to VCs. And it's like, no, it is better to get warm introductions to VCs, but you don't have to. You can absolutely get traction sending cold emails out to investors. Now, are you going to get every one of those emails responded to? Absolutely not. But if you do your research and you target funds that like your industry, like your stage, understand the space that you're in, and you're hyper targeted with your email and saying like, hey, here's my background, here's what I'm building, and here's why you're a good fit for this round, that gets their attention. And so, for me, I was able to start that networking experience into the VC community through these cold emails. And for me, the second step was, look, you're going to get so many no's during that fundraising process. I mean, it is just a fact of life where, we were pretty successful. I mean, we closed a process in, I don't know, 3.5 months or something. That's pretty good. Pre-seed round, which is pretty good. And we still had probably 100 investors that said, absolutely not. And so for me, as we were getting to the end of the conversation with folks, whether they were interested in moving forward or they were passing, I would ask every one of them like, hey, is there someone else that I should be talking to about this round? And so for me, I took the handful of initial calls that I got and turned that into, about 100 or so investor calls at the end, of that process. And so I think a lot of founders are always hesitant, to ask that question. But what I found, especially for a lot of the later stage funds that occasionally do, pre-seed investing, they were actually very happy to be helpful and say, hey, yeah, I've got 5 or 6 guys that you could talk to, because they wanted to show value and build that relationship so that when I was raising my Series A, I would want to call them like, oh yeah, he made, a ton of introductions at, my seed round. Let me go back and give that guy an update on the business. But I think a lot of founders can be hesitant to do that.
Oh yeah, true. So let's see. So you have an idea, you have a name of a company, and now you have funds, right? So now it's time to go build and building a team. And execution is, I personally think, the hardest in today's day and age. I know you said it's hard to go raise money. Yes, it's true. It's not as hard as building a phenomenal team, because that money will disappear if you make mistakes in recruiting the right team. So Tell me a little bit about how did you find your first few partners? I don't like to call them employees; they're your partners because even if they are, whether they are or they're not shareholders in a company, most of the times they are. It's a partnership. It's not a employee boss relationship to me. We are all a team, and it takes everybody to work together like a Swiss watch, right? One of the small pieces fails, the entire watch breaks. So tell me, how did you find your early partners, and what did you look for? What kind of characteristics that you felt was necessary for them to come, be a part of this entire industry, or basically be a part of Tilt?
Yeah, certainly. So, couldn't agree more that especially the early, team members are really make or break for the journey that you're going to go on with the business. And I think for me, the thing that I really indexed on was, are they aligned on the mission? Do they share the values of the organization? And do they actually have a passion for the problem that we're trying to solve? And so a lot of the early team did not come from a traditional payments background with decades of industry experience. Over time, we've added folks that fit that mold. But for me early on, I was really looking for hustlers that were excited about the mission, that shared the values that I thought were important to Tilt, and then really that passion for solving the problem that we were going out to solve, I think was really critical. And for me, a lot of those early conversations were talking about Stripe. And so, people are like, well, why are we going to win, against Stripe? And as we started to dig in, to that conversation, you could just see the passion and the fire, in these folks' eyes. Like, we can do this. Like, we can go, take on this, 800-pound gorilla in the space and really, build something that's meaningful. But that was kind of how I indexed a lot of, my initial conversations was interviewing more on kind of soft skills, and then make sure you have people that have the relevant skill sets to do their job, but really overemphasizing on the soft skills.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what you said is so important. Passion is important, and just that sense of ownership, right? I'm a part of this. I'm going to be here, because you can teach technology, you can teach payments, you can teach programming, but you can't really teach passion. You either have it or you don't have it. So that's so much important to have that initial passion. And then once you have that, I think, at least according to me, rest of it kind of just comes along. So we have been talking all about business. I want to take a little bit of a turn. I saw a post. You're going skiing, and you had a little, blue label tucked in the back. I myself, I'm a whiskey maniac, a whiskey fan. So let's talk about a couple of different things. Obviously, you love skiing. I saw a baby seat there, and I saw whiskey. So it's a complex question, right? Obviously, first let's start with, how do you balance, your work and your outside of work life? Because clearly with a car seat, you have a baby or you have a little kid. So how do you balance that, being a founder, trying to raise money, trying to grow this company, all of this, and plus you have a young child, and you're a father, because at the end of the day you go home, and you're a father. So how do you balance that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the honest answer is it's hard, and there are many points throughout the last 4 years where I would argue that I failed in that balance. But I think for me, I've got 2 little kids at home currently, third on the way, and so my life.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. My life outside of Till is definitely chaotic, and I think for me, I had a couple of things that I just said, these are non-negotiable. I am going to take my kids to school every day, and so I get them ready, I take them to school, and so that's time with daddy. And then for me, I try to be home to put them to bed as much as I physically can, which can mean limiting traveling and limiting late night events, and hey, the team's in town, I'm not going to dinner. And so it's setting those boundaries where it's like, look, this is important to me. I'm going to miss a lot of time with the kids, but I'm carving out these kind of specific events that as much as possible say are non-negotiable. And so I think for me, it's really trying to say, hey, this is something that's important to me. But oftentimes I think where I struggle is like actually carving out time for myself. It's like, okay, I've carved out, my tilt time. I've carved out, the time with the kids. And it's like, okay, well, how much is actually left over, for me to focus on myself. And I think that's the piece where I often struggle. And so thus, weekend, skiing up in the mountains, nice bottle of Blue Label, occasionally you got to say, hey, I've got to take a break. I've got to go have, some downtime and just, have a little fun.
Absolutely. You actually said two things which are very important there. One is you pretty much confirmed that entrepreneurs only sleep 3 hours a night. And then second, you said that entrepreneurs need to have extreme time management skills, because without that, it would be a big failure. Like you can't do things. Now, I honestly thought your answer was going to be that Blue Label, right? That's how I balance everything because that's what keeps me in check. Because I tell you, man, there are some days where I'm just like, I'm going to just down this whole bottle because I've been through so much. Now, unlike you, I travel and I have kids that are a little bit older, but I will tell you, this is a time where you want to cherish them because they once they get to those teenagers, they want nothing to do with you. I'm right there right now with one of mine. And I'm like, I'm home after a week of traveling, and I hardly get to see him. I have to pull her out of a room and say, "Hello, I'm here."
Take away the iPads.
Exactly, take away the iPads, turn off the Wi-Fi, and so on and so forth. But it's so right. You're so right that that's important because that also recharges your mind a little bit differently and helps you look at life a little bit differently. So the question that I would like to ask next, actually, I would like to talk about is, clearly coming up to this stage has been hard. There is a lot of ups and downs, like all entrepreneurs face. There are times I'm pretty sure you have told yourself or thought to yourself that I don't want to do this, or why did I do this? Like I had everything going perfectly for me, and this madness drives me to do this, and now here I am, right? So, what is the advice that you would give to people who are in this, mindset of do I do this or not? Because I meet people every day and they're like, they have a job, they're making great amount of money in their job, but they're just not happy inside and they're like trying to do something different, but there is this fear, like, there is risk now. I was comfortable and now I'm taking a risk. So what's your advice for people?
Yeah, I think, some of it is that everyone's personal situation is different. Some people, are in the position where taking that risk is something that they have the capability to do. And so that's something you kind of have to evaluate individually. I think for me, as I was going through the evaluation process with Tild, I had someone that essentially functions like my accountability buddy. We got together, every couple of months, and he would just ask me, so what's going on with that business idea? Because at the time, Tild, the name did not exist. PayFac-as-a-Service, the name, did not exist. And so for me, I had, a support system of folks that I could really talk through that decision and really evaluate, like, one, do I have the energy and the commitment to go build this business? Am I willing to take, the personal risks and the investment, that it takes to go in? And I think another big question as well is like, is this actually a business that's worth building? And I think that's, an important question that, frankly, I think people can be scared to ask themselves, because if the answer is no, well, wouldn't you rather find that out sooner rather than later before you've invested time and money into building out, that business? And so for me, it was building that support system and then getting out there even before we started writing code and there was actually a website and a business, and going and doing customer discovery and really trying to get at, like, is this a business that's worth building? And so if you can kind of answer those couple of questions and you're still like, hell yeah, I want to go build out this business, then go for it. Take the leap and go build it out. You can always go get another job, down the future, and you'll probably be a more valuable, employee down the line for the experience of trying to build a business, because whether you succeed or fail, it's an incredible learning experience.
Correct. And, one of our pillars here is perseverance, right? And which basically assumes that there is going to be failures along the way. And, a great quote that I would like to share with you is, heights attained by great men did not come in a sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, were toiling upwards in the night. Right? And it's so important is somebody gives up and goes and sleeps while somebody is constantly pounding at it and making sure that there is going to be a hole, right? And you look at the entire, and I give example of the entire Grand Canyon. it took millions of years to actually make that happen, right? But it did, and it's spectacular. So sometimes it's patience, and sometimes it's perseverance that you need to get there. Now, here's the other thing, right? I often see, like, being a founder is easy because you just start something new. That's not too difficult as per se, but being a CEO is actually really hard. So, and you can't go to school, like, there is no, okay, I'm going to take classes that I'm going to become a CEO. There's entrepreneurship MBAs these days and executive management MBAs, but nobody teaches you how to be a good CEO. And I feel like all CEOs hit a point beyond where they're like, I don't know what to do, right? It's almost like we say there is small business, there's medium business, there is large business. I honestly feel like there is this the startup CEOs, mid-level CEOs, and big organization CEOs, and nobody teaches you honestly, right? Most people will say, well, he's not doing a good job, I'm going to replace him. So tell us a little bit more about you being a CEO. Obviously, you had to take advice from somebody. You had to have mentors. You had to, like, sometimes it feels like you want to go back in a corner and cry, yet you can't. You're the CEO. I mean, I don't know if you saw the story, but Elon Musk is, they say that he used to crawl under his table and sleep and sometimes cry. I mean, he has cried on national TV. I mean, if you saw his interviews, early interviews, because he was like, it's hard, man, it's hard. I'm trying to do this and everybody's against me. And while that's the one extreme, the other extreme is like, I almost feel like somebody came with a magic wand and told me, here's what you need, son. Here's what you need to solve this problem. Tell us a little bit about your experience, your journey. Do you have advisors? Do you have people who, guide you, coach you through this? And a little bit about being a CEO.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've talked about this a couple of times and other podcasts where I feel like that transition from founder to CEO is one of the hardest things that we have to do as founders of a business. The reality is a lot of people fail in that transition. And I think when I think about that transition, I have a ton of help. I've got a great team. I've got investors. I've got mentors. We've got an executive coach that works with our leadership team. And so I think, for me, a lot of that transition is really being willing to ask yourself, hard questions and say, like, okay, well, what am I actually good at? Because in the early days, when you're a founder and there's, 2 people, 3 people, 10 people on the team, as a founder, you're doing a little bit of everything. Like, oh, I'm doing some marketing and I'm doing some sales and I'm doing product and I'm doing HR and finance and fundraising. But as you transition into that CEO and it's like, okay, we've got 30, 50 plus, employees on the team, like the needs of the organization actually evolve, quite a bit. And it's like, I don't need to be involved in the hyper tactical day-to-day of sales, of marketing. And so I think for me, the questions that I found to be most impactful were really starting to understand, like, well, what am I especially good at? Like, what can I really move the needle on in the business, and how do we kind of leverage, those skills versus like, what are the things that I'm doing in my day to day that I don't enjoy, that I'm not good at, or both, and then delegate those tasks off. And I think for founders that succeed in that transition, they get comfortable being uncomfortable, kind of figuring out what they should and shouldn't be doing in the business, and then get comfortable delegating and inspecting that those tasks are being done. And then the opposite, for folks that are struggling with that transition, I think it's holding on too tight to the things that you ultimately can't scale by holding on too tightly to some of those aspects of the business.
That's great. I always felt like, I have 2 daughters. So in our household, it's always girls power, right? I don't have a son, and my son is my 2-year-old dog, literally, right? And of course, so when we look at things, we look at, I feel like sometimes women are many cases natural born CEOs, I call them, because they have to run a household, and they have to run a household every day, especially with men being gone, busy, and being CEOs, and that's what I teach my daughters, is like, you're a natural born CEO, because when you take care of the family, when you look after all of this, it's comes to you naturally, because every day, I mean, that kid is different one day to the next day to the next day. So how do you guys look at in your company today, right? We're all talking about DEI, right? And Data Seers does a little bit of a different take of DEI. So we employ diverse people in our company. We have people from Africa, we have people from Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Asia, South America, North America, everywhere. We speak many different languages. So we actually focus on it. If you spoke a different language, we want you on our team, right? And we'll teach you anything else. Equality, we actually have a good mix of men and women. And inclusion, we actually have created a very inclusive environment where everybody's given an opportunity. I tell people that the day you want to take my job, I will walk away. I trust me, I don't want to do this job. I can't take the ownership of myself out of the company, but I can definitely not be a CEO. So how do you guys look at that world in today's day and age where we are living? I'm pretty sure you get asked this question a lot about diversity, equality, and inclusion. And what does it mean to Tilt?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, for us, the idea of, having a diverse culture, having, inclusive culture is certainly something that's been, paramount to us. I think one of the challenges that we faced in the early days, I think we got up to 10 employees and we looked around, it's like, okay, well, we have, 10 white guys on the team. This is not, a good situation for us. And at that point, started to kind of have that kind of hard conversation where it's like you look around, it's like, okay, well, yes, there's a lot of folks in the payment space that fit that background, but are we really, approaching our kind of hiring, process appropriately? And at this point, the company looks completely different, than it did, in the early days. We've got, women on the leadership team. We've got minorities on the team as well. And so for us, we have kind of recognize like, hey, we didn't start, building a culture that looked that way, and kind of recognize, that issue, and then took action over the last couple of years to put ourselves in a position where, we are a great place for people of kind of all walks of life to come work.
Absolutely. And, sometimes things happen, right? If you think about a banker, the first thing comes to your mind is an old white man, right? And you can't, it's time to change that, and it's changing, but it's hard to change that mentality. And a lot of companies are doing phenomenal job, especially fintech brings that refreshing, change where we have everything, like, and it's so refreshing because you hear different things. You don't have a single mentality, right? A male perspective, a female perspective, a white perspective, a not white perspective, and a American perspective, an Asian perspective. And that's what I think fosters innovation and creativity in today's day and age. So here is the $1 million question, right? Obviously, you are where you are today. If you had to do this all over again, what would change, if anything?
What would change, if anything? I think for me, like one of the biggest lessons that I learned was not being fast enough firing people when it wasn't truly working out. And so I think, for me, that's probably been the most impactful lesson that I've learned, is that you have to really focus in that hiring experience more so as we did in the early days, kind of values, mission, culture. And then if it's clear that, that's not working out, make those changes. And I think that would have gotten us to where we are a little bit faster than kind of the journey that we've been on first time around.
Gotcha. Yeah, we made some of those mistakes early where, we just did not make great hires, right? And again, we all make mistakes, and we implemented a testing method now. So everybody has to take a personality test. Everybody has to take a skills assessment test before they come on board. And what we found out was our percentage rate of churn, right, whether they left on their own accord or they just couldn't do the job and we had to get rid of them, has reduced drastically, because we won't even bring them on if they're not the right people, right? Because the cost of churn is higher than anything else today. I mean, I'm pretty sure you have read some news where companies are spending hundreds of millions of dollars in some massive, large layoffs, right? So anyways, I want to really thank you for this podcast with me, Caleb. I know you just got an award for ETA's 40 under 40. So congratulations. I was a 40 under 40 in 2020. So everybody was at home, did not get to celebrate it. I just, my alcohol was my friend during that time, right? Because everybody is home. Every day is Friday. Every day is Monday, right? Those days are behind us now. But I really appreciate you being on this podcast. And if you do come down to the ETA event here in Atlanta, would love to meet you here again in person and talk more business. So for all the listeners who have tuned in with us, thank you for listening. And there will be more coming.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me on today.
Thank you.